Okay.
All right. Hello.
Glory.
Welcome to Full Circle where we now have sound. Let's go. Dada is
Wild.
just Dada's just doing stuff. I'm T1G joining me here. Miles in his sunglasses. iFlame maybe in some sunglasses at some point. Dada in
I
his
mean,
sunglasses. As you may have heard, my sunglasses are out in my car. Unfortunately, I'm missing out today. Oh, the single lens. That was like the thing, right? You used to wear like glasses with no actual glass in them. That
hmm,
was a thing back in like 2010. I
was
feel like
it?
that was
I don't know,
popular.
but I don't know if that was ever popular, let's be honest.
Okay, maybe not popular, but it was a thing. Anyway, so we got more OWC to talk about today. We've got the quarterfinals to recap. We've got the semifinals to predict. Um, Last week was kind of wild, so we'll have a decent amount to talk about. Both in the matches and some kind of overarching themes. And this week is going to have, I think, some pretty ridiculous matches as well. Like we've got six predictions to make because we're predicting everything other than the potential matches, and I think all of them are pretty difficult. So it should give us some good things to talk about. But for now, we're going to start a couple days ago. We're going to go back to the quarterfinals match week. And we're going to start with a couple of losers bracket matches that were very interesting. Our first one, and we're going to have Dada intro and talk about this match a little bit, was Indonesia versus Norway, which was a pretty wild back and forth affair that ended up going to tiebreaker. So, Dada, get us started here with some thoughts on how that match went. I know you commentated it so there firsthand for everything.
Dude, Indo versus Norway was holy man, like Norway kinda like they proved themselves that, their seeding wasn't just a fluke. They had like a good showing on a lot of maps. Meanwhile, Indonesia also. Like you see this match, it was like a 10 versus 12 seed or something like that. To happen this early, like the quality of the match was already expected, but like to be this close as well. And like it was pretty back and forth. I believe Norway kind of pulled it back near the end, and then we had like, of course, the tiebreaker nonsense that happened. Like probably one of the most back and forth tiebreakers I've ever seen, if not like just one of the most back and forth tiebreakers ever. And like it's unfortunate that one of the teams actually had to leave. Essentially, Norway has to get eliminated is really unfortunate because like both of these teams made their argument like a really convincing one to stay in the tournament, and obviously Indonesia still in the tournament. Spoilers for a little while later, but it was an amazing match, and I'm really surprised that this Indonesian roster has like managed to overcome all the adversity, all the people that they miss from last year or the year before that, like Skydiver, Krez, Lifeline, everyone, and they still managed to like get good results. Like I think they might be like past the point that they had last year, like past the result they got last year with all these players. So yeah,
I think it's
Yeah.
really interesting. Go ahead.
All right, I guess I'll go.
No,
Obviously,
you're
we had
right.
a lot of questions about Norway after their loss to the UK, and I think they kind of answered them, even though they did lose this match, unfortunately, by just a few thousand points on that extremely close tiebreaker. We kind of got to see the best of both their old and new strengths in this matchup. They did a lot of picking in some of the gimmickier skill sets. They picked the Air 8 and won it, with GN Yokes playing well on that. They picked speed with their new roster, seeing players like Nineric and Yompa Torman playing really well on those maps. And obviously, Nineric, I think he top scored the tiebreaker. Unfortunately, not having the backup to win that, but of course, it was a really good match from both sides. And Indo, of course, clutching it out and making it through the weekend, which is really good for them with all the adversity, as Dada said.
It was, yeah. And like you mentioned, Nineric played so well in that match, had way higher match cost than anyone else in that lobby. But ultimately, Indonesia just had a stronger kind of core players. And a lot of times in OWC, that is what you need, right? You can't just rely on that one player to carry you. Ryudo played very well, RHO as well. And incredibly close, but they pulled it off. And like you mentioned, Dada, this is the new highest placement for Indonesia, regardless of if they move on or not. So good for them.
Didn't they get really high a couple years ago though?
It was two
They
years
got
ago, right? When they
7th
beat,
slash
because they
8th.
because
They
they
beat
beat.
China.
Well, they
Mhm.
beat UK, right?
Oh yeah.
that was the big Indonesia match that I think people will like think back on in earlier years,
Where
when
they speed
they
abuse
kind of
UK.
speed abuse. Yeah, exactly. Like that was a match that was infamous for being speed abuse because they got like you can only ban one map per pool, but you can double pick, so they just got to pick like DT and speed the whole way through and just won on that.
Yeah.
But then they have this like completely different roster and are doing even better than they had last year and as well as a couple years ago almost, which is pretty crazy. Especially like one of their new players top scored the tiebreaker for them. Like it was still a lower score than Nineric by I don't know 70k or something. That noob guy,
Mhm.
which is like you look at this roster of that noob guy, Mindfrost ID as the top two, and then okay, I hate name changes during tournaments. Oh, Ryuto top changed his name between that match and now because you can see in the highlights it's Ryuto, and on the MP link it's now Hakui Koyori
He
because I
changed
guess
it
that's what we do.
between matches because I got
He's
to
Oh
both
my.
oh
Indonesia
my
matches
god,
in the weekend. He changed it between them.
that's so silly. I hate name changes. Anyway, but yeah, like being able to change up the roster this much, and like you guys talked about, losing a bunch of their best players from past years and still getting top 12 is like really impressive. But that match was like just looking at it, it's so back and forth, which is really cool. You like getting to see both teams kind of at their best. Ooh, Norway. I wonder if Norway. Do you think Norway just like keeps this roster together for next year and like runs it back and tries to get another good result?
I
It's
think
go ahead.
some of the players might call it. Like I think Yokespy had problems with hand and stuff like that. Like I'm not sure if he's gonna continue on the grind. Also, like just before I comment on that, Yokespy having hand problems and not being able to stream very well is probably what made Norway's roster on Tiebreaker like not good enough. Because they had like two players below 300k, they really couldn't play the map that well, and the tiebreaker was very streamy, so it kind of like didn't let either Yokespy or GN kind of like step in and try and carry the Norway roster. It was basically just Nineric and even Anthony W didn't really score that well.
Yeah, it's kind of tough for Norway because they have historically had some pretty high placements, but over the last 3 years, they've really been struggling a lot more to really get past this kind of stage of the tournament. And so I do think if they're going to switch it up, next year is the year to do so.
Yeah, but I'm not really sure if they really have many emerging players in tournaments right now. Like we obviously saw Anthony W, their I guess biggest newcomer this year. Haven't really seen much of him in community tournaments. And he obviously performed well, played a lot of maps, played pretty well on those maps, I think. So I'm not really sure if we're going to see much change from Norway. Being someone who talks to Yokes a lot, I think he'll probably come back again for another year. Not too sure about GN, but I think we're probably going to see a very similar Norway roster to this one. And we're going to be looking for a lot of improvements from Nineric to hopefully improve his overall skill set enough to maybe be like a solo carry player in the future OWCs.
Yeah, I think if he expands his skill set out, like that's the skill cap player on their team. So if he expands his skill set out, that'd be very helpful to them overall. But yeah, I very impressed by both these teams. I mean, Norway living up to their 13th seed, finishing 13th through 16th, or no, that's 18th through 24th, isn't it? Almost living up to their seeding. Indonesia actually living up to their seeding. They'll be in an interesting spot this weekend. But next match I'd like to discuss is was this the second match of the weekend? France versus Taiwan. This is a super hyped losers bracket match for this week that I think everybody expected to be good and did I think end up living up to the expectations. And I know iFlame watched this one back and is pretty familiar with how this match went. So let's hear from him first on thoughts on France defeating Taiwan in that 6-4 battle.
Yeah, I mean, this is a Taiwan team that I know even in previous podcasts we talked about them struggling a bit, but I mean, I think the general consensus was that this was a team that had a lot of potential, that core of Zane, Riser, Shield, and Flask that have always been there, can do really well on these early stage pools. And I think they just showed up today. Obviously, Dazzlewind was kind of the standout player for them, but they had some good supporting combos. I was honestly really shocked to not see Taiwan ban HT2 against France, but to their credit, somehow they won it. They did get obliterated on their Hidden 1 first pick, which I was not a fan of because, even though they won Hidden 2, it does feel like France should just be the better Hidden team. So I was a little bit surprised by that pick. But honestly, otherwise, it was really well fought. Both Okoro and Vroom played incredibly well to win it for them. And it was very close to going to tiebreaker, but maybe just a couple of mispicks from Taiwan, and they didn't quite make it there.
That Hard Rock 3 felt so tailor-made for Vroom. Same for the Nomad 5. Those are just like Vroom
Yeah.
maps, and like even the Nomad 4, like there were so many Vroom maps in that pool, and you could tell from the results like how well he did. Top scored with the FC on the Hard Rock 3, for instance. That dude is scary on his maps, assuming he shows up and is motivated.
Assuming he doesn't like go missing.
Yeah. the
That's
disappearance
interesting.
of Hatsune Vroom.
Oh God, why? Yeah.
Now-
So,
Oh,
oh, good. No,
I was just
you.
going to say, I do think France is a solid team this year, but regardless of losing a close match here, I feel like Taiwan is without a doubt going to be pretty disappointed with this year's OWC performance, and I'm not sure if maybe just kind of those core three are just not as good compared to the competition anymore. But this is their lowest OWC placement ever, so
What
a
a
new
show.
low for Taiwan here.
They needed
Yes.
Sheena Noriko, like
They
unironically.
really did. Noriko would have filled up so many holes. Like they won that AR8, but they won the AR8 with Shield getting under 400k. Meanwhile, Noriko on that roster would have just gotten such a good score on that map, I feel.
Yeah, they won the Air 8 against a team with Ikoro, Thunder, Musty, with someone with like 300k or less. That was yeah. Taiwan, I think they just need to cycle out like the old guard a little bit. They need to cycle out Flask Riser. Like the people that they're still respectable players, but like they need some new blood to kind of like replace them eventually. Otherwise, we're just gonna see more like this where there's like some motivation issues, a couple of issues adapting, a couple to the a couple of modern picks, and like I'm a little bit disappointed. Obviously, I was very bought into the idea of Taiwan this year, but didn't end up happening. I think I bought a little bit too much into the hype of the big name players, and I didn't realize that for some of them there might be a little bit of a motivation issue, or like maybe just their best days are slightly behind them. But yeah, it's a disappointing showing for Taiwan, but I don't know. France played well, and Taiwan did show up to this match at least.
I'd like to shout out on Taiwan Dazzlewind and Spines Knight. I know I haven't seen Spines Knight playing that many tourneys recently, but of the maps I saw him playing, he played really well FCing that AR8, or almost FCing, and also I think FCing the Hidden 1 round of 16, Spring Cleaning of the Mind. Really good scores from him. And obviously Willie, another player to look out for on Taiwan going into the future. But of course, that was a pretty close match, but ultimately a victory for France, and going to be really excited to see what they do this week. They've got some hard matchups ahead of them.
Yeah, I think France, for teams in the losers bracket, had one of the couple better weekends with the following that up with the 6-1 win over Singapore. So we'll see. But they have such a hard match this weekend that we'll get to a little later. It's always been the question with Hong Kong, I guess, or with Taiwan, has been their like motivation. Like they won 3WC 2 years ago and then didn't even have a team the next year. Like I don't know. Taiwan and motivation it's been a problem. So I don't know how they're going to be able to develop new people if they do want to recycle out some of that old core. So that'll be something interesting to watch out for in coming years. Like they just have such a hard time getting players to be motivated to actually play in World Cups. So we'll see how that goes. All right, so a couple of losers bracket matches there, and then the winners bracket last week was really interesting because it was a story of like the two halves of the bracket, right? You had the bottom half where Poland and Germany just ran over their opponents, and then you had the top half where there were two incredibly competitive matches. And I do want to start off just with the United States versus Hong Kong because I don't think anyone predicted this match to go the way it did. If you're used to seeing US versus Hong Kong in these late rounds where it's always like 6-1, 6-2 at best, USA normally just gets to this point and kind of starts hard stomping everyone. Some extenuating circumstances, obviously, and they did still end up winning, but this was the USA looking much more vulnerable than they have since like 2018 against a team not named Germany. That's the only team I'm pretty sure that they've lost more than 2 maps in a match to, right? In the last like 4 years. So thoughts, let's go top right just to give everybody a chance to be first. Top right to Miles there. USA versus Hong Kong. USA 6-4, but a much shakier result than expected.
Okay, so obviously, first we have to take our caps off to Hong Kong. They played incredibly well on their own picks. They picked a lot of aim maps, some gimmickier maps. I think just the classic Hong Kong skill sets. They have been so good at aim in these last few years, so good at gimmick maps as well. Very strong tech team. And I would put them in the upper echelon of teams on those types of maps. So obviously, if USA wasn't coming out fully prepared or without their full roster, I would expect Hong Kong to give them a really good fight on those maps, which they definitely did. Looking at that scoreline, 4 maps against the USA, haven't really seen that from many teams that aren't named Germany. Actually, that is the best performance against the US since the UK era, not apart from Germany.
18 UK was the last time a team not named Germany won 4 more maps against the USA.
Yeah, but I'm still not worried about USA, and I am never going to be worried about USA until they actually lose a match, because they haven't lost a match since 2018. And, you know, they were missing players this week. Obviously, look at the bottom left of your screen. You don't expect Monko to have to play an AR8 hidden, and they still won that map. Like, they missed Fancy, a core player, and they missed Sawada, who's a core speed player, and I'm still not worried about this US team. Obviously, this South Korea team has been kind of a boogeyman in the bracket. Of course, we're going to talk about that match later, but like I'm still not worried about the US, and now that they're in semifinals, their true skill cap is really going to shine, and I am not scared of that. I said the same thing after Israel. I'm going to say the same thing now. I am still not scared for Team US.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have to agree. Another thing to note is, aside from just Sawada, I think Rectigon was also sick. And if you look at last week's performances, Rectigon was their best player by quite a large margin. So if you lose one of your best players, all of a sudden that Hong Kong US match, of course, comes a lot closer. But I do want to give a lot of credit to Hong Kong as well. Suwagi and MCY4 have been just like popping off this entire tournament, consistently getting top 15 individual performances, putting up really big scores for their team. And they have really carried this Hong Kong team as far as they've gotten, and gotten them, well, this far in the tournament, like I said. But honestly, if not for that last kind of HD2 pick, I do think Hong Kong probably had a shot at going to tiebreaker. Although unfortunately, I don't think they win the tiebreaker anyways. Another thing I thought was,
did win Nomad 4. I just want to toss that they did win Nomad 4, and I know Utami said that USA would have been worried if it had gone to tiebreaker because of the nature of that map. So
yeah,
there's that to think about.
Yeah, I mean, another reason I'm actually not too worried about the US either is because Utami was just a monster that game as usual. And the scary thing is, if you actually look at Utami's scores, as much as it feels like Utami carried and he did put up the best scores, if you actually look at the score differences between these two teams, if you take away Utami's score and put in any other player, there's a good chance USA wins that map anyways, and that is absolutely terrifying.
I think. Oh, go ahead. Dada's got thoughts.
The dissenter is coming.
Dada wants to flame USA so bad. Go flame
I
USA.
I don't want to flame USA. I don't want to flame USA. This is not like a hot take Skip Bayless type, like, oh, USA has four Mickey Mouse like that's not like that. I think that obviously this shows a little bit of a crack, but the circumstances were as they were. Like, it wasn't enough to actually be worried. What has me a little bit worried is that their depth is not as big this year.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this because, I watched the matches, I watched, like, a couple of the looked at a couple of the MP links, looked at the statistics, and it's like Tommy, he's the front man. He's the guy who's gonna like put you on his back, etc., etc. He's the equivalent of the Malashevsky. He's the equivalent of the White Cat, of the what have you. But they really need Joel to step up, and they really need Rectagon, because after that, their team, like, it still is top tier, but it's now in like the middle of the top tier. Like, their players are just as good, maybe a little bit worse than some of the other ones. Like, they definitely need those three cylinders to be firing in like very strongly. Otherwise, they might have some problems. Like, you saw Rectagon sick. He didn't have quite a good match, but it's excused. You saw Joel not show up. You saw Sawada maybe like limit their picks a little bit, but like everyone else, they played fine. They played good enough to win. But it's Hong Kong. Like, Hong Kong was never expected to be that kind of like boogeyman for the USA. They were never like the team to really beat them. Nobody really like expected it. So like, I wonder how this team will do against South Korea this week, or Germany or Poland the week after that. Like, there is a little bit of doubt creeping into my mind.
And that was something that I was kind of thinking about going into the tournament. They bring in Boshiman and Dickaton, who have quite literally zero high-end tournament experience, especially in late rounds. Taquito is kind of, I feel like, not playing his best, right? So you're kind of, like you said, the depth pieces are not quite where they have been in the past, and they still, they top scored. They top scored no 1-1. The two teams played that, so it's whatever. They top scored Hidden 2. They top scored DT1. They got second best on DT2, third best on DT4. So like, clearly the team is still there, but the lows, I think, for USA this year are a little lower than we're used to seeing them. The highs are still just as high, but their skill floor to me feels like it's not quite where it has been in years past, which is something that can be concerning when you come up against some of these teams in the late rounds that are able to put up as good of scores as you are. Like, if you have not a super great day in the past, the USA could still win stuff. Now there's a little bit of doubt in some of those picks that previously they would have won even on like their second best or third best day.
I'm just scared. I'm just really scared that if Utami has another week like he had in qualifiers, if that happens in finals or grand finals, I'm scared that the team will actually collapse around him. Like, that's my biggest fear.
They do still have Rectagon, who has been playing well, but FancyLad, I think FancyLad and Taquito to me are guys that kind of need to step, because they're not playing badly, but they're not playing at their peak. And if you want to win OWC against the way some of these teams are playing, you really do need to be at or near your peak.
I do think this is the weakest we've seen the US in years, honestly. And I think one thing that is kind of scary for them is they no longer have like, the undisputed best tournament player on their team in like Vaxai, right? Now you have players like Malashevsky, players like Karcher, who are arguably better than any of the players on the US, or I mean, it's certainly close at least. But the US no longer have that like undisputed, oh, we just outscale everybody, because we have players like Malashevsky that are coming in, dominating the tournament scene. And Malashevsky probably scales better than anybody on the US, but we'll have to see.
Just probably.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So last but not least, very much not least, the opposite of least, last and most of this previous week's matches. Match of the week, I think. South Korea versus Canada. Canada takes 5-2 lead. South Korea comes storming back, wins 4 points in a row, takes the match. I don't even know where to start with this one. There's so many strange things that had to happen to have this match go the way it did. Suboptimal rosters, a ridiculous performance from Karcher and worst HR player, a tiebreaker that kind of uniquely suited South Korea, who have, two of the best tech map players in the world right now. Canada kind of underperforming outside of like maybe their top player or two per map. This was a wild ride. So I think we need to try to figure this one out. Dada's got his sunglasses on. He's ready for something here. What's he ready for?
Okay, so we didn't have Full Circle last week, but I can tell you right now, like I'm gonna ask, how many of you believed in South Korea? Be honest, before the match happened.
I thought that would be close, but I didn't think they would win.
I absolutely did not, but I am very biased.
Yeah, I mean you're Canadian, maybe, but
I thought a good
yeah,
TB.
I thought this was gonna be like a 6-4 match in
I
favor
thought
of
it was
Canada.
gonna be a 6-4 match in favor of South Korea, just because South Korea, like this roster has impressed, I think everyone, because ever since Core States, where they kind of played with a similar stack, like they have just shown up to all these maps, and they have surprising depth. Like you see these names that you never really know from like common tournaments, common Western tournaments at least, and then they just show up and like have great scores. Like obviously we have a little bit of bias because everyone in Canada, like this core is super popular. This core, everyone knows how good they are, but like the stats and like the eye test, the South Korea just had both of those on lock. Like this team looked impressive. They looked like world beaters, and they played like it. Like Canada, they had the lead. They had an impressive showing, and they just kind of like let off the gas. And it can't let off the gas against world beater teams because they will just turn it around on you. And it's a shame that like the tiebreaker performance by Karcher kind of overshadowed everything else. But like this South Korea team has looked genuinely impressive, and I'm really excited to see how they scale into the later rounds.
I mean, I do agree. South Korea has certainly looked impressive. Karcher and worst HR player have been incredibly dominant duo. I don't think, well, I didn't expect worst HR player to be playing as well as he did. Karcher, I don't think is a surprise to a lot of people. It's kind of interesting. Canada did lose, but when you look at the actual match costs, I don't know if it's even fair to say that Canada underperformed necessarily. Every Canada player outscored their counterpart in terms of match cost. Zudinator and Ryuke both in the top 10 in terms of individual performance. Silas not far behind, but I mean, really, what that came down to is, Canada had a few picks where they were winning by something like 500k, 1 million points, whereas I don't think SK won a single map by more than 300,000 points. There was one that was a 30,000 point difference.
Other than the tiebreaker.
Yeah.
Go
Except for the
figure.
tiebreaker, of course, where Karcher just destroyed everybody. But there were a lot of close maps where it feels like, one less miss for Canada and that map goes your way. And all of a sudden that's a, 6-2, 6-3, 6-4, whatever match. And South Korea is the one knocked out instead of Canada. But instead, they lost all the close maps, and now they're knocked down.
They
Yes.
lose all the close maps. They had the first map in the match was like a 50k endeavor that went Canada's way. But yeah.
Also,
Okay.
something interesting. I just want to point out real quick before Miles. If Canada ran the right roster on DT2, they win this match 6-1, and we're not having any of this discussion.
Yeah, that was the
agree.
first thing I was about to say. My biggest question of this match from Canada was where was Curtis and why was Nick playing DT2 and getting a B rank? I know, like, Nick is typically pretty decent at that skill set, and from what I've read in a Discord server, it might have been Xylus just wanting him to play a map because maybe he wasn't really in that many rosters otherwise, but, like, I'm still really confused because, like, unless Curtis was missing, like, you have him on the team for this type of map, like...
I do think Curtis was missing. He didn't play a single map that match. So.
He didn't play a map, but
No.
from what I know, he was there.
Oh,
Or
okay.
like at least they had a different roster for DT2, but apparently like there was some internal scramble that people wanted some other people to play maps over other people. Like I thought their roster decisions were questionable overall. Like I don't understand like people like Nick playing DT2. Obviously, this is in hindsight because he's a phenomenal stream player, but maybe the type of map just wasn't for him. People like Sari playing DT1, where you expect Sari to be this like hard rock, maybe like more favored towards the hard rock threes and twos, and then all of a sudden they're playing like a DT mechanics aim map. Like, do you not have better people for that? You have this very good roster in theory, you have this like really good 5 core with like good supporting players, and then you make the supporting players play over the core roster, like on maps that they shouldn't theoretically play. So I'm confused by a couple of the lineup decisions, and I think that really cost Canada for a lot
Yeah,
of these.
it
Yeah.
really did, especially in a close matchup like this. Like Canada they were really close to winning this match. They were up 5-2 and they gave us a choke job for the ages, but yeah,
20-3.
yeah. Nonetheless, you really have to give credit to South Korea and especially their depth. A lot of people didn't know what to make of South Korea's depth players this year, but when you look at their massive comeback, that DT1 that they won by under 200K, partially because you had Sari bottom scoring that map. No offense to her. I don't think she should have been on that roster for that map. But you saw Parisia FCing on South Korea, getting nearly the top score in the lobby, matching Zudinator to give them the point. And then next on the hidden 2, you had Nope KJK FCing, winning that one by 41,000 points, matching Zudinator again. And then, of course, the Karchin started, FCing HR3, and then getting that absolutely absurd
that
score.
TV score was stupid.
So, like, obviously, you kind of had expectations on Canada for players other than Zudi to step up on those maps. Like, you had those same expectations, I think, for players like Xylus and Ryuke, who obviously had their maps, but like last year we saw Xylus having absolutely insane performances in later stages, and just kind of wondering where that is this year. I know he kind of lost a little bit of his motivation prior to OWC.
If you lose your motivation, you shouldn't be fucking playing OWC, man. Sorry, not
Yeah.
sorry.
Let alone the
I think
captain.
his motivation is more for OWC. Like, he wants to play OWC. He doesn't want to play like community tournaments, and which I kind of get, but like just a little bit of a regression. Like, but last year he was absolutely insane, and regressing from absolutely insane to like a pretty good player and a core player on a top 3 team is like still good, but still like South Korea clutches up, and this was a choke job from Canada, and you can't really take that away from either team.
It makes me really interested, and like we said, we'll discuss it, in a minute here. It makes me really interested to see what happens this week, because South Korea is showing that they have just like the clutch gene, which has kind of been like the hallmark of some of these top teams in the past, like the United States or Germany, or going back a couple years, the UK, where like they just managed to win matches that are closely fought. And then Canada, you lose from 5-2 up, man. Maybe that seed of doubt gets planted just a little bit in the back of your mind. I do think they should be fine this weekend, but there's always that chance that like, oh, we just lost like that, and it hits you a little bit, can hurt the motivation a little bit if you already have people who are having motivation issues. I don't know.
There's 2 different kinds of teams. There's teams that crumble after that and just give up, say, oh, we're not really gonna go anywhere. Look at how we lost. Look at what we've done. Like, it doesn't matter anymore. Then there's teams that really like up the grind, like say, okay, no, we can't do that anymore. Let's take that as a learning experience and really grow from it. I'm cautious about Canada because in theory they do have this week a very easy-ish bracket, considering so this week their losers bracket matches shouldn't be hard, hopefully, if you're Canadian or at least like a fan of the roster. But also, like, for their top 2 aspirations, I think we really need to see how this roster evolves and how they're gonna like handle this loss.
So we'll see how those things go. Now, obviously there are a bunch more matches this weekend than just those, but those are like, I think, the big ones, and we'll see, I guess, how Canada recovers and how South Korea plays. I do want to give a quick shout out to a couple other teams from last weekend that we aren't talking about their matches specifically. So China comes in, plays 2 matches, doesn't lose a single map. 12-0 weekend for China. And that's a team with 3 of the straight up worst players in the tournament, statistically speaking. And they come in 6-0 Italy, 6-0 United Kingdom. Shoutouts to China. How good do we think China is? Like, are they actually good, or did they just get good matchups?
I'm gonna put,
Both.
bit of a halt on your hype train. Honestly, I don't think China is that good. I have to feel like they're probably the worst team left in the tournament. I mean, they beat Italy, right? Which is like Italy has not had a good tournament. I'm not surprised that was a 6-0. And UK historically has looked pretty good, but it just has not been the year for UK. They haven't really looked great in most of their matches. And so I definitely didn't expect China to 6-0 UK. But even then, the match was a lot closer than the score showed. China won 2 maps by 50,000 points. So it's not like China just obliterated the UK, right? There were some close maps. And so I'm very hesitant to really get excited for China and be hopeful for them in the rest of this tournament.
I'm hopeful, but China statistically are the worst team left in this tournament. Even FIA, which has been a phenomenal standout, obviously, like nobody besides maybe some Chinese fans knew what they were capable of, and they've really been the best player for China throughout this whole tournament. Like,
Right.
besides FIA, they really have all of their players like below average or dead average on the statistic sheet. They don't pass the eye test like in scores. They do it in results because they had a little bit of an easier bracket with UK collapsing. But like, yeah, I'm hopeful for this team, but I don't think it's this year.
Yeah, obviously, I don't think they really have that good of a matchup for this week. I don't really think they can make it out of this weekend alive. But obviously, props to Fia. China's going as far as Fia's gonna goddamn take them, and I am so hyped that she's like now the best tournament player after being the best mapper. So kind of just like the best player in OSU, I think. So yeah, obviously,
shout outs to mouse only DT3 FC. Like, that's not right. Also, of note, top 12, right, is this weekend that the teams are left, or top 12? It's all top 12 seeds, like 1 through 12. Has that, I don't know if that's ever happened before, but like,
I can't imagine, not in OWC at least.
yeah, I don't know if this speaks to qualifiers being really accurate or there just being this like gap in talent, because the teams that advanced in the losers bracket this week that took out like the 14, 15, 17, 20 seeds, which is Australia, Indonesia, China, France, and those wins, did so like, I think, decently convincingly.
Yeah, to be honest, this OWC, to me at least, definitely feels like there's kind of very distinct tiers of teams. And pretty much everybody left in the tournament is kind of in that slightly higher tier, except for China, I would say. I think with China, it could have been, Philippines, even Brazil, maybe they could have made it instead. But aside from China, I don't think there's really any way any of the other teams remaining were getting eliminated without a big upset.
The only one was like, I guess there was a world where Brazil could have beaten Indonesia.
Brazil
And then
would
you'd
have
have the
beaten
15 seed.
Indonesia. Okay, Brazil would have beaten Indonesia. It was really funny. They had a 4-1 lead or something like that for Chu. And then there was a tech pause because I believe Dito, like, his power went out. And after that tech pause, the momentum completely shifted. And in a world where that tech pause doesn't happen, I think there is, like, a very high probability that Brazil scores the win. But it just gave Indonesia, like, just enough time to, like, calm down the nerves, compose themselves, and get the win, which is it's unfortunate and not because I think Indonesia is like a better team to scale. Like I don't think Brazil would have made it farther than Indonesia will, but like it is something that did happen where I think that is notable. Like it might appear like a choke job at a glance, but like it was a tale of before timeout and after timeout.
Also, that match was like the longest match I've ever seen. It took them like
Yes.
40 minutes to play 3 maps. I wanted to die. That was painful to try to watch.
I was filling in for that cast, and I had lunch by like an hour and a half after, and I was like, okay, no, I got this. This match will end before, and then the match lasted 30 minutes after that time limit. So yeah, it overlapped into the Poland Russia match. That's how long it took.
Which
It
was
was 2 hours after.
Like Poland Russia was at 16 UTC. That match was at 14:30 UTC. So freaking hour and a half. Yeah, I don't know. Servers need to stop having issues on weekends. That would be really nice, especially when it's not even on Bancho. Like this is like private server. I think that's kind of the key points. I think a lot of the other stuff that we would talk about, we touch on in predictions here. So unless anybody's got some random other thing they would like to bring up before we move on, we have some semifinals predictions that I think might be pretty interesting to talk about.
I have one thing. Shout out to Philippines giving a good fight to Australia, and after that, I have nothing else.
Philippines is a team that could continue to get better too. Like
I
Henry
think
has
so,
gotten
yeah.
really, really good, and they're other and they once they get what's his face back.
Jock.
Yeah, once they get Hyok back, like that team could actually be like top 12, top 8 potential if Henry continues playing as well as he has been, and their other like kind of fill players continue improving. And we say goodbye to Philippines, Brazil, Singapore, UK in 13th through 16th. I think those are all. We'll have to go like next week since there are fewer matches. We'll have to go back and see how our predictions fared, because there's pretty straightforward, but the tiers might be a little different. But yeah, so we've got predictions. We've got semifinals week. We're gonna be starting in the losers bracket. We're predicting everything other than the potential matches. We've got 6 matches to talk about here. We're gonna be starting just lowest seed, working our way up. So it's gonna be Romania versus China as the first match. This is the 12th seed, or the 11th seed versus the 12th seed, Romania versus China. Of course, Romania coming off of the 6-2 loss to Germany that they played a lot better than a 6-2 makes them look. They top scored, I think, they top scored one map, but they also got second place on 3 other maps, or 2 other maps, and third on another, and they lost all of those. So, like, this match could have been super, super close, but they ran up against Germany, which was just a buzzsaw. And then, of course, China, as we discussed, they went 12-0 last week, but they're not as good as a 12-0 makes them look. So, in my opinion. So I'm just going to start it off here and say it's Romania, and they win by something like a 6-3 or a 6-4. And then we'll go from there and see what Miles has to think.
I'm gonna say something similar, except maybe a little lower. I'm gonna say Romania by like probably 6-2. Like I think China's just a little too much of a wild card, and I think Romania has a clear advantage on some more mechanically based maps, like aim and tapping mechanics. I think are just squarely in favor of Romania, and they also can break point those gimmick maps that China are very good at, and they're going to be relying on fewer players, which is why I think it will be pretty dominant.
Well, it's Romania. Like I've joked before saying China will win because this is the Chinese protagonist here, but like Romania just has better scaling. I think China has been relying too much on the performance of Fia and like one other hero play, and this is the pool where they finally get outscaled. Like statistically, they're the worst team in the WC remaining, and like they shouldn't make it farther than this round. I think so. Romania 6-2, 6-3 is where I'd guess.
Gonna have to pretty much agree with everybody here, and I'm gonna go 6-3 Romania. I think FIA has a lot of work to do if China wants any hope here. I mean, you look at the Romania roster, Badu, Eternum have been playing incredibly well. Lucrece even has been stepping up. Even Rizé last match got something like top 15 individual. And so Romania has actually looked very strong despite the loss to Germany, and I think it's going to be fairly decisive.
All right, well that's straightforward enough. I think this was always going to be the easiest one for us to agree on, because it's just a big gap in like team performance over the past week, and yeah, Romania is just good. So that's 4-0 in favor of Romania. So China can make us all look really silly. They've got some major receipts here if they win this. But so good luck to them. But they're going to need that luck. All right, next up is a very interesting one: Hong Kong versus Indonesia. That is the 9th seed versus the 10th seed. Of course, Hong Kong losing 6-4 at the hands of the United States. Indonesia winning 6-5 and 6-4. So they definitely had the most difficult week of any of these teams that made it through 2 matches in losers bracket. Indonesia played a lot of maps. They played a total of like 21 maps, and I think how many of those are unique? Like half of them are in change. Hong Kong wins pretty much any way you slice it, 4-2. The 6 maps that they have in common. So Hong Kong looks like the better team, but does that trend hold in the actual match? Let's go other way. Let's go back iFlame and see what he has to think.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say yes, it absolutely will hold. Like I mentioned earlier, MCY4 and Suwagi have been absolute beasts this entire tournament, putting up massive scores, competing with some of the best players in this tournament. Whereas Indonesia, players like Ryudo, RHO have been putting up strong performances. But Indonesia doesn't really feel like they have anybody that can put up those big carry performances. And then the other thing is, I feel like Indonesia has had a bit of an easier bracket than a lot of the other teams here. First, going up against Norway, who's very strong but not an amazing team, and then Brazil as well, both of which they both lost to. And I think Hong Kong is significantly better than either Norway or Brazil, so I'm going to have to go 6-2 Hong Kong.
One Hong Kong, Dada.
I'm going to go a similar route. I think this is a decently easy victory for Hong Kong. No matter how much you slice it, it's like they have a much better core roster to play maps. Indonesia has more depth, but it doesn't matter if like your main players in maps can't like match scores of the other team. Hong Kong has looked impressive. Indonesia has like obviously given away a ton of info as to how they like to play slots, how they like to pick, how they like to ban, how they like to just like how they play certain gimmicks by playing basically 2 marathon matches in a row this last weekend. So honestly, it's just Hong Kong just has the better time here on like pretty much any universe you really have this match on.
I pretty much okay guys, this is crazy. I agree with Dada.
No,
No
we're
way.
bringing that
way.
back. We're
Not
bringing that back.
again.
We're doing this again.
I'm gonna say Hong Kong by the score of probably about 6-2, but for reasons that were already mentioned by Dada and iFlame. But I would like to add that Indonesia, I think, has a route into this match in that Hong Kong doesn't really have a 4th speed player. And I know you can ban out speed all you want if you're Hong Kong, which I think they'll do. But like I think if Indo can have a person to match like an MCY4 carry and like some decent supporting scores for that, they could win points there. And I think that's where they are going to get on the board in this match on whatever maybe left-hand mechanics maps are left open. But other than that, I think there's a lot of overlap in strengths that just end up favoring Hong Kong. Like Hong Kong's so strong on aim and tech, which are both things that Indonesia have won in the past in the last week. But Indo's a gritty team. They've played close matches. They came out. So I think they could give Hong Kong a fight on their best day. But I think on paper, this definitely favors Hong Kong.
Real lunch pail kind of squad. First in to the gym, last out. Type of team. Indonesia. What's interesting, you talk about Indonesia being like better on speed or whatever. They had 3 DTs in common last week, and Hong Kong actually won both DT2 and DT4. The one that they lost was DT1, and Hong Kong won DT1 or DT4 by like nearly 1 million points over Indonesia. So the fact that Indonesia on paper is like, oh, they have a 4-man that can play speed better than Hong Kong has a 4-man that can play speed, apparently just doesn't matter, because Hong Kong is, I guess, just better. But this is another one for Hong Kong here for me as well, because their core roster is nuts, right? Like, I'm still at 4 Suwagi. Sooner or later, A21 is going to show up, right? Like, I expected kind of big things from him, and he hasn't been playing at, I think, his peak. He gets kind of overshadowed, though, because it feels like it's always MCY4 and Suwagi, I guess. But Hong Kong still just has a stronger roster in terms of their core, and they scale better. And like you said, they have kind of certain similar strengths that Hong Kong is better at, as well as Hong Kong having some additional kind of strong points that I think will help them out here. So
Just
yeah,
one
this
thing.
is what's that?
just one thing. When I said China is the statistically weakest team in the tournament, Indonesia is very close behind. The only reason why I didn't like make it a essential tie between Indonesia and China as being like having that bottom spot is because Indonesia just has so many more maps. So like their score gets affected by their bad picks, the picks that they wanted to avoid, and they had more losses as well. Meanwhile, the teams that China faced, kind
They
of
lost
rolled
0
over and
points.
died. Yeah. So
Yeah,
but
Indonesia
Indonesia
lost
has a case to be either the second worst team or the worst team in the tournament statistically.
By the
Still our
way,
meeting.
I said that Indonesia can win speed just because not that Hong Kong doesn't have higher scores. It's just that the bottom score on Hong Kong was like a B rank on speed maps. Like they had like a 250k,
true.
350k B rank. And if you could get someone to match that top score, that's why I thought Indo has a chance on that skill set, just to clarify.
Indonesia had some really weird results too, where like Hidden 2, they played twice. The first time they got the 17th ranked score of the week. The second time they got the 5th best. And like the same thing happened on DT1, where like their first match they got 16th, and their second match they got 6th. I don't know what to make of that as far as it concerns like their ability to be consistent, but we'll have to see. But yeah, Hong Kong still wins this one. I think things get a little more difficult now because the next match is our 7 versus 8 seeds, Russia versus France. Of course, Russia got kind of dominated by Poland, right? 6-2. They didn't really get to play a ton of the stuff they're good at, and Poland just rolled over them. France, of course, as we discussed, had a very competitive affair against Taiwan, and then kind of just blew out Singapore. So this one I think is a very interesting matchup stylistically between these teams, and I want to know, going to the middle this time, what Dada has to think for his prediction on this one.
Well, I know that France, they've been essentially they had that really disappointing kind of showing versus Hong Kong where they lacked room, but like ever since they got to the losers bracket, they've kind of proven themselves to be very strong. They've obviously outscored their best placement in like 6 years after they beat their last match. So it's with a heavy heart to say that I am favoring Russia on this one. And I'm favoring Russia on this one for a couple of reasons. I think that this pool has a lot more accessible speed for picks. So like Russia obviously is going to be able to exploit that. I think France has not shown themselves to be a particularly good speed team. They had issues on DT3 last week. They had not that good of a roster on DT4 as well, but DT2 was really where they shined. Meanwhile, this week's DT2 is a lot less accessible, where you have a 240 BPM map, a lot of stamina, a lot of troubles for players that aren't like exclusive speed players, and Russia has a lot of those. So like the speed dictates this match. I think that even on no mods, Russia has a slight edge, but on every other map, it's either an edge to France or like it's even. But I think just because Russia is a team that lives and dies by the speed, lives and dies by like the mechanics and stuff like that. Like I just think they will win. Maybe 6-4. Maybe it'll go to tiebreaker, but I think it'll be a 6-4 endeavor.
Okay, so I'm going to disagree with Dada. Holy shit!
Wow, unheard
It
of.
happened.
Okay, so France. So as you said, Russia lives and dies by the speed. But looking at these rosters, I don't think that speed in general is unwinnable by France. I think Russia is going to have a pretty linear pick strategy for this matchup. They're going to go with those maps. And France is probably going to know that. And being competent on it, they're going to probably put up some good scores on those maps. And while I think they do have edges on other places in the pool, I think the free mod pool this week is extremely favored. This isn't a Koro free mod pool. That free mod 3, that free mod 4, that the free mod 1 as well, also being a very accessible aim map. I think France might have an edge on that skill set as well. Aim. You have players like Vroom, Justman, Thunder, Hifkill. I just think their roster is going to have a little more depth on the rest of the pool. while I will give Russia credit that they can win those picks as well on the Gimmicure side, I'm going to be looking very intently at Vitya. I think he's going to be a very key player. While this match will ride by the speed, because that's going to be Russia's, like, I guess that's going to be their gun that they're going to try and shoot. But Vitya is really going to be, I think, their key player on some other skill sets. And if he can take a break point on something like a free mod 3 or a free mod 4, then the match could go in favor of Russia. But I'm going to say France 6-4 or in tiebreaker.
Mr. iFlame.
I'm going to have to go ahead and agree with Miles on this one. I'm going to say France 6-5 in tiebreaker. I mean, this was for me the hardest of all the matches to pick a winner on. And if I had to predict this match in any previous round, I feel like I would have gone Russia in a heartbeat. They have had solid scores throughout the tournament, but it felt like they collapsed a little bit against Poland last week. Obviously, nobody expected them to win against Poland. But when you actually look at their scores, they had a couple of good scores here and there, but they also had a lot of really low ranking scores, things like, 13 out of 16, 7 out of 8, things like that. And so they just didn't look good last week. I think if they can recover this week, they probably have the edge over France, but I do think Okoro and Vroom have both been playing very well at the last couple of matches. France only dropping in losers bracket while they're missing Vroom, who has been their second best player after Okoro. And so I would have to give France the slight edge here.
All right. So I have to couch this in saying that I think this match could legitimately go either way. So don't come after me, team that I'm going to predict is losing if they end up winning. But I'm gonna agree with you guys, and I'm gonna say France can win this because I think of there's a particular route by which they win this match, and it's basically like what you guys said. France bans free mod 2, and then whichever of DT2 or DT3 they feel like is worse for them. Russia picks the other one of that. Russia picks like DT1 and Nomad 2. And then France just wins everything else on paper. If you look at their results from like last week and the way that France has been performing, I am not going to outright say, oh my God, France like wins this like 6-2 and Russia only wins the couple of speed picks, because I know that that's unlikely. But I do think that France, like you guys have said, on things other than those raw mechanics, other than just we're picking speed and winning speed, looks stronger than Russia on a lot of stuff. I mean, Russia got 16th on free mod 1, 16th on free mod 3, 14th on nomad 2, which is supposed to be like their skill set, right? That's just tapping. Yeah, they did well on like DT4. They top scored DT4 the 4-way FC. Yeah, they did pretty well on DT2, but I was more impressed by the all-around performance of France than I was of the all-around performance of Russia. I think it was strange to see Russia just go down 6-2 against Poland. And also, what happens every year when we get to semifinals week with Russia? Like, they just lose, right? Like, every year. I don't know how it happens. Russia
You can't
can get...
say that. You can't say that because what happens every year with France? France gets wrecked by some D-ranker Asian team, and they got wrecked by a D-ranker Asian team, but they still
Russia,
they still are here.
Okay, but Russia's not a D-ranker Asian team.
Yeah, but France already broke the historic precedent. You can't just go like, oh, Russia hasn't done it yet, so fuck them.
Yeah, France has outplaced their, I think, last 5 years worth of OWC placements.
Yeah, I mean, I have the hope in my heart that that France continues playing well, and I'm not anti-Russia here, obviously, but I think that there's just more maps. There's just more maps, it feels like, for France, but there's some difference makers on Russia. If Gamer keeps playing really well, if Vitya plays really well, if Chikoni does the late round scaling, like, Russia can win this. But I think based on what we've seen, it looks like it's kind of France favored, but by like that much. That one's gonna be I think that one could be like match of the week in losers bracket. That one's gonna be really, really competitive.
For sure.
A match that I don't think is going to be match of the week is the last match we have in the losers bracket. Despite it being the 4 seed versus the 6 seed, Canada versus Australia, it is Canada coming off of a really unfortunate loss that if I were them, I think I would have a chip on my shoulder, be like, no, we need to prove everybody that was a humongous fluke on our part to lose that match. And they're against an Australia team that they just have way more depth than. I mean, Australia has the best player in the world on their team, but after that, like it falls off pretty badly once you get through the first couple players. Also, I'm not sure what their rosters are going to look like for some things. I don't know if they have everybody this week. I know they've had concerns about having all their players available due to various reasons. But I think Canada just has better depth. Yeah, nobody matches Emmerich, and he probably wins Australia a couple picks on his own. But I think Canada wins this one, and it's like 2 break points. It's like 6-2, 6-3.
Okay. It's really hard to predict Australia, as you said, because when they have the best player in the world, you can't really count them out. It's like saying oh, who's gonna beat the Cleveland Cavaliers in the East when they have LeBron on their team? It's like LeBron can carry like a terrible core around him to the finals. Not saying that it's like a parallel to Australia. They have other very good players. We've seen Dumi playing really well this year again. And I think some of their players can step it up. Players like Milo Milkshake, Vivace can come back to his form from like prior years, and Suffix maybe practicing a little bit more or playing at his best. I still think this best Australia team can win this match. There is a way they win this match. Everyone's going to disagree with me, but I still think Canada wins, by the way. I still think Canada should win. Definitely on paper. Everything that Aaron said is correct. And I think they're going to win probably like 6-4 or 6-3. But like Australia has a shot. When you have the best player in the world, you have a shot. And the other players on their team are damn good too. So I really want to see them play really well in this match and make us all eat shit because we're all going to say Canada. We're just all going to say Canada.
Maybe, you don't know for sure yet.
No, but I want to eat this shit. Like, please win Australia.
I'm like
okay, OBJ.
unironically,
Okay, OBJ.
I'm like unironically rooting for Australia. No offense, Canada. I'm just friends with a lot of the Australian guys. Like, it's just how it is. But even rooting for them, I don't think they're gonna win this match. Anyway, go ahead, Dada.
Yeah. Oh
Okay.
yeah. Dada.
I'm gonna go the exact opposite route of Miles. Miles was like, "Oh, I'm rooting for Australia. Like, I really think they can win this match. I think Australia has no chance. I think Canada will win
Brutal.
this like 6-1, at most 6-2." And I think that it's simply like you can look at the stats, you can look at the streams, like the VODs. Australia doesn't look confident. They don't look consistent. Emmerich is a shining beacon of hope, followed by like this one little twinkle in Doomy, and then everyone else is not playing up to par. They're not playing up to this stage's difficulty level. Meanwhile, Canada, they had a good showing by basically 3 out of their 4 players, and even their 4th player wasn't really even that bad on most maps. And like, they have a chip on their shoulder. They just got upset by South Korean roster. They want to, like, if I'm assuming that they recover mentally, like they want to like make a statement win. And I'm saying this like, I love the Australian guys. I love commentating with Mavs. I love listening to this cast. I love Dummy, obviously, like big dick guy, but like you can't just rely on one player to pull you up when you're up against an elite roster like Canada. Like, it's just not a thing. The Cinderella run ends here.
Cinderella run of the team seeded 6th. I mean, I don't know
Team
about Cinderella.
Seeded 6th in
that was
weird
actually
fashion.
That was actually like the Cinderella part of it, right? Was the fact that they got the freaking 6th overall seed. Like what that was, I didn't think they would get that high. I don't think they thought they would get that high. Anyway.
Well, I think it's my turn to say I agree with Dada. I think it's going to be a 6-1 for Canada. You know, it's nice to say Emmerich is the best player in the world and he's, you know, the shining beacon of hope for Australia. But, you know, solo play and tournament play are very different. And Emmerich is obviously good, when you actually look at the stats, he has not been the best tournament player by any means. He's looked very good, you know, getting 8th, and then 6th individual overall, which is impressive. But then you look to Canada, Zudinator has had better individual performances time and time again. And then you also have just way more depth players like Ryuke, you know, even Xylice. So Emmerich has already been performing worse than Zudi throughout this tournament so far, and while I'm sure he can carry some maps, after Emmerich, it's Doomy, and then you kind of just fall off a cliff from there. Whereas Canada feels like they have a lot more depth to their roster. And I've also heard Australia is not actually that invested in this tournament. So maybe some motivation issues there as well.
Always a concern. We'll see how the motivation holds up. Oh, that's a 4-0, our third 4-0, but with good reason, I think. Which leaves the winners bracket, and this is where things might get kind of interesting. Winners bracket semifinals. First semifinal, United States versus South Korea. Flip a coin here. Let's say Miles. Let's say Miles go first. I want to hear the Americans' take on United States versus South Korea.
Okay. United States by the score of 6-2.
Ooh.
By the principle. By the way, like, it's just which team US are we getting in this matchup? Like, we've talked extensively about both of these rosters. South Korea being surprisingly deep, United States like being a little less deep than we expect, but still a United States roster nonetheless. They're going to have the player to match whoever South Korea puts up as their best score on any given map. And I think the backing scores are going to be better. And that's pretty much all there is to it. I think there's not like going to be a main skill set that they go for. Obviously, United States being arguably one of the best speed teams in the tournament. I think they're probably going to go towards picking speed, but they can kind of just pick whatever they want because it's the United States. I don't think South Korea is going to really have like a beachhead of a skill set that they can like repeatedly pick. I mean, usually that would be aim against Team US, which is what they probably do. It's what they're going to try to do, at least in my eyes. It's what every team that's taken points off the US in the last few years has done. So they'll probably replicate that. But I just think United States after last week, I feel like it's kind of going to be like an up and down. You saw first week woes against Israel into a stomping of Singapore, into some woes against Hong Kong, and I think they're going to stomp the South Korea team.
Do you want the other American to give their thoughts?
Go
All
for
right,
it.
I
Save me for
guess.
last. Save me for last.
All right. I think you can't bet against the United States until they give us an actual reason to. They came out and didn't play particularly their best, missing players against Hong Kong, and still won with Hong Kong playing like the match of their lives. And I'm pretty sure this week the USA is going to take this seriously. I have a hard time imagining that they're not going to have all their players and like be ready to go. I don't think it's like a 6-1, 6-2. I do think it's still like a 6-3, 6-4 scenario because South Korea is really good. But I do think USA wins. I do want to mention something interesting looking at their scores from last week. So again, you have to look at this in a vacuum. They didn't have Fancy Law, they didn't have Sawada. Rectagon was not feeling his best. They only won they had 8 maps in common and they won 5-3. And of those 5, one of them was a 108k win on DT2, and one of them was a 2,900 point win on Fremod 3. So they were within 110,000 points, basically, of actually losing 5-3 on maps that they had in common. And the maps that went the other way were like 450k, 530k, 660k. So what I'm saying is this South Korea team is capable of playing really well and putting up really good scores, but you have to remember the United States were missing players, had players not playing at their best, and I think that's hopefully, and for them, for their sake at least, going to be different this week. And I think you get to that late stage, teams don't ever seem, other than like rare occasions, don't ever seem to play their best against the United States in late rounds. And I'm curious to see whether or not South Korea can join, the pantheon of like Germany or old UK that actually do play their best against the United States, because that's always been, an issue for a lot of teams. Like the last time these teams played, the USA swept, right? Like 2 years ago, was it?
Grand Finals 2019, yeah.
Or 2019, yeah, 3 years ago. I don't know that they've played since then, so we'll have to see how South Korea, what South Korea shows up. They have worst state chart player, they have Karcher that are going to do well, but United States matches and their depth, despite not being as good as it's been in the past, like Miles said, their depth still outperforms South Korea's depth, and I still think they end up winning this like 6-3 or 6-4.
Okay.
Not as gonna have the spicy take. Let's go.
My take will be just like, let's say a poblano pepper. It's not that spicy, I think. I think the US still wins. And I think it will be closer than Miles was expecting. I think it will be closer than maybe even Aaron was expecting. I'm expecting a 6-4. I'm expecting a decent showing from the South Korean roster. But South Korea has a real shot if the US doesn't fire on all cylinders. Like if the US isn't 100%, South Korea can, I won't say easily, but they have a real chance of actually winning this. If you're like a betting man, if you're like I'm gonna go on pick'ems and try to predict the underdog so that if they win, I look like a genius and get 5 points instead of 3. Like if you're that guy, I think this is a good match to do it. Like South Korea is not out of it. They looked very good. They statistically look quite decent. Like obviously, as Aaron said, you can't really take the head-to-head comparison that well, but just in an overall sense, South Korea looked pretty good in multiple skill sets. Specifically, aim like Fremont 1, like they had a really good time. They had also a Hard Rock 3, I believe. They also had one of the best showings there. Like they have avenues into this match where they can potentially like really score an upset here, but it'll be tough. And I think the US is still the team to beat. I think the US is still basically the juggernaut that hasn't yet met that unmovable object. So I feel.
Well, as a Canadian, I am obligated to root against the United States, and therefore, I will be picking the United States, of course. Had you for a second, though. I mean, look, Karcher and a worst HR player have been playing very well, but on the US side, you have Utami and you have Rectigon to match those two. I think Zyson looked really good last week, but as the pulls are getting harder, I'm a little bit doubtful whether he can keep up that same level of performance. And the US, of course, does have so much depth to their roster. I do think they look a lot more beatable this year, but unfortunately, I don't think South Korea is going to be the team to do it.
We got another
6-3,
6-3.
6-3.
We got another 4. We got another 4-0 sweep here. All right. Well, maybe our last match we can be a little split on. Perhaps we'll see how this one goes. Last, but
I think so.
Again, absolutely not least, Poland versus Germany. The really reductive way of phrasing this would be to say Malashevsky versus Germany, and I think that saying that is a little bit unfair to Poland because I do think they have other players who are performing quite well in this tournament, but when you have the obvious by far best player so far in OWC on your team, that's who people are going to be watching. That's who people are going to be talking about. Germany, though, they've got Kriller, they've got Whitecat, they've got a host of other really well-known names. So I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts on how this one is going to go.
Okay.
Let's go Dada. Let's go Dada.
Oh, okay.
Remember when I said, Emrek is, he can't solo carry a team. You can't just rely on one guy to do things yet. You need to get much further for that to happen. Well, Emrek is the 6th best performing player last stage. His closest teammate was number 36, Dummy. Meanwhile, on Poland, you have a much wider gap. Malashevsky was the best player in quarterfinals. He was he had more average score than Emrek. He had a better performance scores, which is a specific statistic thing that we use in the OWC stats sheet. He had a better performance score by almost 0.25, better than Zudinator. So he is by far the best player, and it's not close. Meanwhile, his closest teammate is number 39, Mishny. So if you thought Australia couldn't get far because they are relying too much on one player, then Poland also follows that same logic. I think Germany has a much more rounded team. Besides when Shark kind of had a couple of not so good performances in some maps, they showed a really solid 4-man core that on most picks should outperform Poland by a decent margin. And that's why I'm going with Germany 6-3. I don't think it's going to be that close. And I think that this is a real shout out to Poland Like they need their other players to step up to an OWC finals level if they want to like keep going forward. Like this is their first match where I think they'll not perform as well. They'll go to loser bracket and then they'll face like Canada soon. I think, in my opinion. So like they need their other players to step up. They need their other players to like at least support Malashevsky in a way that allows them to get Malashevsky to the harder pools to get that like that solo carry potential really like running. But as it is right now, the pools are still too easy for that to happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go, Miles. Let's go,
Okay,
Miles.
okay. Wow, guys. Okay, I'm agreeing with Dada again. Pretty much, it's a little too early for Malashevsky to really make the difference against this Germany team that has really not shown like any cracks whatsoever thus far. While Poland haven't really faced that much of an opponent that can fight them on their skill sets yet, I think we're going to be seeing like Kriller is going to be able to Kriller and Whitecat, of course, are going to be the two who are going to be up to the task of matching Malashevsky on any given map. And I think they're probably going to do it well, but even then the backing players on Germany are probably going to make up the difference here, even if there is a massive one between Malashevsky and the top performer on whoever Germany is going to be. But once again, as Dada said, these Polish players, they do have a lot of potential. I know players like Rafis have been extremely strong in the past, Bartek as well. Newcomers like Nahus, Wypan, and Mishny, of course. Mishny is not a newcomer, but you all know how good he can play. We all know how good these Polish players can play. They just need to step it up. They can totally win this match. They just need to have that roster that can fight a superpower like Germany, which they definitely have, but we just have to see.
Mr. iFlame.
Well, honestly, I don't think we're going to have quite as much diversity in our picks as I was hoping we would. I am also going to have to go Germany, but I'll go 6-4. Now, just to highlight how much better than everyone else Malashevsky has been throughout this tournament, he has been number one individual performance every round except for one, where he was second to Zudinator. So he has been far and away the best player. The problem is, on the side of Germany, like these two guys have already said, you have Kriller and Whitecat, who are both top 10, consistently top 10 players. You always have at least one of them in the top 10 overall. Other one not far behind. Smarty has looked really good last round. And they have relied a lot as well on Okinamo and Smarty. I feel like they don't have quite as much depth to their roster as Poland. Kind of interesting fact about Poland is if you look at their match costs throughout this tournament so far, there's 7 players that have been in the top 4, and I feel like that's super rare, which is cool to see. But I don't think it's going to be enough. I think Germany just has, Kriller and Whitecat going to have no problem matching Malashevsky on a semifinals pool. The pools are not hard enough for that to be a big difference yet. And then Germany just has the better supporting players.
Man, this is a shame, huh? We just go 4-0 again here. I'm picking Germany as well.
Man.
That being said, so there's some interesting thoughts about this match. Poland and Germany shared 4 maps in the quarterfinals week, and Poland won 3 of them. Granted, one of those three was free mod 3, which they only won by 16k. 2 of the others were Hard Rock 2 and DT2, which Germany lost both of in their match against Romania anyway. So like they didn't play those super well, I guess. Not super, which is weird because you'd expect Germany to be really good at DT2s. But I think this is like, Harry Potter, Ireland is going to win, but Victor Krum is going to catch the snitch. This is basically Malashevsky is going to catch the top match cost, but Germany is going to win. They just have a better overall roster in terms of like what we have seen from them and what we can expect from them. Like you guys have said, at length, the discussion's been done to death by now of how far it takes you to get to the next best player from Poland in match costs once you go past Malashevsky. And when you have the other team with players that are playing as well as you can expect, Whitecat, Kriller, et cetera, too, I think this can like go to tiebreaker. This is a really close matchup that I think like overall, but I just feel that Germany is a team that will find their way to win. I don't know. I mean, again, this is another one where like save the receipts, Poland, because if you guys win, I think we can all eat shit over it. But like Germany is just top to bottom a stronger roster, even with Malashevsky being the best tournament player in the world right now. I think
Yeah.
Germany is the better team right now.
Poland can totally win. Like, keep that in mind. Just because we're having a 4-0 Germany in this panel doesn't mean that Poland can't win. We'd say that Poland can win, but not on the back of Malashevsky alone. They need the other players to step up, and it hasn't happened yet. I think. Like, they've played well. They played well enough. The bracket has been relatively easy. The number 2 seeded bracket generally is. Shout outs to Canada in the last few years. But like, they need to step up right now. Like, if this is a week to try hard, to grind, to fucking get your head down and just work, practice all the maps in the map pool, like get all the cheese down. Like, do you have anything you miss on? Just like try to find a way to hit it, maybe a cheesy way. Like, this is the round to do it. This is the round where you solidify your top 3 placement if you win. So they really need this. Like, they need everyone with 100% confidence and like work ethic to actually win this.
And I think if they do lose this match, it actually starts to get a little bit scary for Poland. If you look at the quarterfinals team scores for all those kind of top 5 teams, SK, Canada, US, Germany, and Poland, Poland has arguably the worst team scores, and it feels like they're the only team left that still has that one main carry. Germany has Kriller Whitecat, US has, multiple carries. Even South Korea has Karcher and worst HR player. And so I think, especially as you get into these later stages, it can be really tough to rely so heavily on one person. And so I think if Poland does drop this match, I would be a little bit worried for them in the losers bracket next week.
They would drop down and probably end up facing Canada, because I think out of that quadrant, it's most likely to be Canada coming through over Australia and then the Hong Kong Indonesia winner. And man, Canada is a team that can, again, like, finals might be where we get to the point where Malashevsky can actually solo carry, but Canada has, like Zudinator, etc. So somebody who's also really good in late stages if they pick and ban properly. So yeah, that gets scary. I have heard, people talking about and writing about on Reddit and Twitter and stuff that, Poland put together this roster and have been thinking about late round, right? They want to be ready for semifinals, finals, etc. So maybe this is the time where they turn it on, they shift into that next higher gear, and surprise us all with a victory here to get them into finals for the first time since 2017. But I think the odds just favor Germany, and that means we have 4-0 for 5 of our 6, and only one person dissenting on the 6th. I think I think that looks unfair on paper, because I think these matches are all going to be really good. I think semifinals weekend is like one of the best overall weekends in terms of performance, because the top 12 teams are insane. Like, there's so many good teams still in this tournament, but I think there's somebody favored in all of them. And I really wish I had some sunglasses so I could go put on some sunglasses as we're ending things off here and, have that thing. But unfortunately, my sunglasses are out in my car. So that is the predictions for semifinals. We've got Romania over China. We've got Hong Kong, Indonesia. We've got mostly France over Russia, Canada over Australia, US over Korea, and Denmark. Yeah, and Germany over Poland. Any final thoughts here, Miles, Dada, iFlame, anybody on semifinals weekend that's about to start here?
I just have one thing to say.
Go for it.
If I'm the only dissenter on any of the matches, if Russia does win, you will not hear the end of it next week.
Hey man, we all said that Russia can win. We just think that France will.
Yeah, definitely. We could all eat shit on our predictions. Like, it may seem like we're saying that it's like gonna be like very heavily in favor of one team, but like it's gonna be good. Like, we're gonna get close matches. Hopefully, I only see maybe 1 or 2 matches ending up as stomps. Other than that, we're gonna be seeing some good OSU being played. Maybe some upsets. Hopefully, I hope Australia beats Canada, and that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I'm just really looking forward to these matches. This OWC feels a lot closer than a lot of previous years, where to me it feels like really any of those top 5 teams could take a match off the other one if they're playing well. So looking forward to seeing how it plays out.
All right, and so matches start early tomorrow morning for anybody who's in the Western Hemisphere. 12 UTC Hong Kong versus Indonesia, 14 UTC Romania versus China, and then 17 UTC Russia versus France. And then we go into some evening. You've got some late night stuff that'll be happening tomorrow night. So, it's 8 matches. It's semifinals weekend. It's going to be some good OSU being played, and we are all very excited to get to watch it.
Also,
I hope you guys are all too.
Remember to do your pick'ems. They lock in 14 hours. So
I have
I've
to
seen
go do
plenty of
mine.
people. I've seen plenty of people like missing their pick'ems by just like forgetting. Last week, I saw like 3 separate people. Oh, I forgot to do pick'ems. Oh no, because
Like
the
me.
matches started very early, and like I know a lot of you don't really care about pick'ems, but it is a fun little way to have like at least some sort of emotional investment in the matches that you're not particularly interested in. I think it's overall fun. Like it's not like a betting scenario where it can get like, oh, why did you lose? Fuck! Like I will like send death threats to all of your family. But it's like it's just fun and it gives you a way to or a reason to be invested. So yeah, have fun on the weekend. Have fun watching the matches. I wish every player in OWC to have fun playing and have the best of luck. So yeah, it's fun. It's about fun. F is I forgot the SpongeBob song.
F is
F
for
is for
friends.
friends
I
who
think
do
we're
stuff
done
together.
here.
All
I
right,
think
we're
we're
on.
done here.
We're on a
Goodbye,
151
everyone.
hour break. Thank you guys for
And
watching.
it's
Have
for
a good weekend.
anywhere
We'll
at
see you
any
next
time at
time.
all.
Thanks for joining us here at Full Circle.
Down here in
Bye-bye.
the deep blue sea.